how's it going, guys? This is Jackson Dabney from DabneyTech podcast. I'm joined here with Janek Ambros from Assembly Line Entertainment. How we doing today, Janek?
Good, man. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Janek has a production company and is also a writer, director of multiple films. He also makes other films for other people as full-on production house. I'm gonna go ahead and share some of that, share the screen with you guys real quick. There we go. All right. So yeah, this is Assembly Line Entertainment. These are some of the features that they've done. They just got one here. Desert Angel, I Really Love My Husband, In the Summers. And then this one here, Ukrainians in Exile, you actually produced and directed that one, right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, a lot of cool stuff here. And one thing I really liked about this is that it's about social change issues and serious topics, right?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely bifurcate that. We have kind of movies that are just meant to entertain or move people, and then clearly there are some issues that I deeply care about, one of which is something like Ukraine, where we'll kind of step into the documentary role. In that case, I went to the border and directed that. In other cases, we will help produce a movie that is a documentary that someone else directed, and we're just kind of there to support it. And it might be an issue that I personally care about, or just broadly an important issue that I think anybody would really kind of care about.
Yeah, the topics that are trending at the time and, social issues. Did you get started with your film career in that sphere of things?
Yeah, I mean, I started the company when I was really young. I was 22 years old when I first moved out here, and I had no money. I had no startup costs. I forget who said it. It was someone like, I don't know, one of the tech leaders or whatever said, the best way to kind of do a startup is if you just, sometimes you don't take out a huge loan. You find a way to do it with cutting costs as much as possible and just not really having overhead and just being young, just kind of being driven and, just trying to trugging through and doing it because you love it, which is really helpful. And it definitely worked. That work definitely worked for me because I'm a filmmaker. So I would kind of make I was in the avant-garde scene, and I'm not really anymore. I make traditional films, but I started off doing more experimental films. My first feature when I was 24 or 25 was a feature-length documentary about the war on terror and how it impacts civil liberties, and that was done for very little money. Because docs, you don't need as much money to make a doc. You can make a doc for nothing. As opposed to a narrative film, which is going to cost you millions. Even if you get it super low, it's still going to cost you at least six figures if you do a tiny budget movie like I've done as a narrative film, Mondo Hollywoodland. But that was a very particular type of psychedelic throwback to the 60s movie that kind of fit to look kind of gritty and raw and cheap, kind of like a Mondo trasho film, So yeah, it was in the early stages. It was very much like putting stuff together with duct tape and scissors, and then simultaneously, because I have a background in economics, I understood finance. While I'm making these kind of more art films, documentaries, lower budget stuff that I'm the author of as a director, I'm simultaneously was learning to help finance movies that were bigger with bigger actors, like you just kind of showed on the screen. There was a Sundance movie back in 2015, the same year the doc came out, that Ethan Hawke and Haley Steinfeld were in. And so that would kind of give credibility to my smaller films because they were on the same slate as movies like Human Capital or 10,000 Saints or Monica, which won awards at Venice Film Festival. And then, and so that was kind of my original plan in my 20s. And then in my 30s, I started to the projects became a little bit bigger. So that's kind of where something like In the Summers, which won Sundance in 2024 now, a couple years ago now, that I was one of the producers on, not just finding money. So that was really kind of how I started, was just going through and getting anything I could made and not being too protective over my filmography, where I think sometimes people may feel like, oh, I need to get it perfectly, I need to get all the money first and then do it perfectly, where I kind of come from the school of just making stuff and definitely just getting stuff out there, and some things work, some things don't, but at least you're expressing yourself, you're making your art, and you're keeping busy, as opposed to kind of waiting for that perfect moment, where really that perfect moment usually ends up happening because of years and years of just kind of throwing stuff at the wall, I think. I mean, there's exceptions, of course, So someone like Paul Thomas Anderson just comes out with Hard 8 and then Boogie Nights. Like, we're not in the 90s anymore. That was a different market cycle. So you have to kind of do things, I think, a little bit differently now, obviously. And yeah.
Okay, you said we're in a different market cycle. What does that mean for you as a production house?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, and I would say we were more of a production company, and not in a traditional sense of production house. Like, we don't produce stuff, we don't make stuff like in a studio, we don't do commercials, we don't do music videos. We only basically we develop, finance, package, and then go and produce the movie and then sell it. So just that's a small distinction.
Okay.
To your question about the market cycle, yeah, I mean, in the 90s there was a lot of money being put into young directors because of DVD sales, or because of DVD and Blu-ray sales, so they can make that extra money. Now we're starting to see a new version of that, where you can kind of make that money through streaming and platforms. That's why you're seeing so many new movies getting made. I mean, it's still it's a miracle to make a movie. But there was probably a better system in the 90s for younger filmmakers to actually get a movie for, $8 million, or, adjusted for inflation, and actually, have the movie seen and get picked up because of that DVD sale was such a big thing. So like I said, it's not catastrophic. I think people over romanticize that era of the blue DVD sales, because now we have streaming and TVOD. So I don't think it's as good as it was, but I think that's starting to kind of catch up with maybe some of the incentives for companies to give chances on younger filmmakers. But they're definitely not as good as the heyday of kind of like Tarantino and Paul Thomas Anderson, and definitely not in the 70s, when studios would not just small companies with blue DVD sales, were studios like Robert Evans and Zanuck and stuff like that. They would just give the keys to a bunch of hippie directors in the 70s, and it lasted 10 years. And then in 1980, the conglomerates took over, and the directors kind of went a little too crazy, and then they kind of wrangled it in, and it made it more studios were the ones in charge, and the directors worked for the studios. So now it's a changing landscape every day. I mean, I think people overestimate the first day I moved to Hollywood, I remember, or like the first week or whatever, I had somebody tell me that there will be no movie theaters in 5 years. That was 2012. So there's always this sense of just constant dooming and freaking out. It's a very nervous industry. If you go back to pretty much any era, you're going to see Variety articles saying, is this the end of movies, whether it was sound coming in or TV, cell phones. Now, of course, AI is a new thing. And so I think that it's always overblown. Like I said, it's an extremely nervous industry. There are reasons to always be cautious about how you plan your business and what you're focusing on. If you're just sitting there saying, I want to make family dramas nonstop, then it's like, yeah, you should probably kind of figure out what people are watching. And if you're also saying, I have no interest in exploring technology to cut costs at all, because I'm a hardliner on that just makes no sense, because technology's always been decreasing the cost of making movies. So I think you just have to have a kind of centralized, balanced, very kind of nuanced view, and keep centered and just keep trying to make good movies. And ultimately, I feel like they just bubble up, and you just have to tell stories. I think so many production companies, they try to become like, they almost suddenly become like macroeconomists and are trying to do forecasting 10 years out. And it's like, dude, you're not Alan Greenspan, like you're not the Fed, you're not the chair of the Fed. Like, this isn't your job to worry about some of these things. And ultimately, no one knows what the audience is going to want when the movie comes out, because it usually happens 2 years later. So to try to be like, it's like, it's weird to think like that. But so you kind of have to know what the buyers want and what the talent wants. So for what we do at my company, and a lot of that is me, because I write a lot of the screenplays that we produce, is I really just focus on trying to get good talent. Because then if you get the actors, it makes it much easier to impel. I mean, that's your ticket to get financing. But with keeping genre in mind, like you want to have some, some sex in it, some like genre elements, whether that's horror or crime or science fiction, or maybe a true story that people might be into about a big, larger-than-life character, a war movie, where, like I said, I do think the drama stuff is a great way to, like a family drama is a great way to showcase a director's talent, and they're super important, I think, in the history of movies. But, like, I think you just most people, like, we try to at least, put major dramatic elements into movies that might, on the surface, seem more genre-ish, or more exciting, or more entertaining, or funny, etc.
Yeah, when you like look at box office sales for like something like Avengers versus Little Miss Sunshine or something like that, people are going out en masse to get in the seats of these big box franchise action films generally.
Yeah, I mean, Little Miss Sunshine is actually an example of when it did work, because it like probably 10x its money. But like 100%. There's, I guess, movies like Little Miss Sunshine that didn't get that, which which in most cases is that's what happened. That's not what, that doesn't happen. So yeah, I mean, and I actually do think, and this is kind of me maybe contradicting myself about forecasting, but while we're at it, it's like I do wonder what the future is for heavy CGI superhero movies are. I think there'll always be room for superhero movies, but I do, with the advent and the just the rise of AI, I do think effects is going to be oversaturated. I think you're starting to see it on your phone, like crazy explosions, and people are just making like Tom Cruise fight Brad Pitt on a skyscraper, and things are exploding, and it's law of diminishing return. There's no more scarcity in that. Before it was like, oh, I can only go see that if I go see a huge movie at the big screen. So you take a look at something like Project Hail Mary, which just came out on Friday, and it's the highest grossing non-franchise movie I think ever in an opening weekend, and that doesn't use any green screen. So it doesn't look like what you might see with AI doing these just Instagram reels or whatever. So movies have always learned to kind of adapt, so there's scarcity. So that usually means talent. You can't just put talent in anything and make money off of it. You'll get sued. And then now I'm starting to think that visually, I hope, I know filmmakers think this, but I hope studios are starting to realize that you can't have movies just look like they're green screen, because you can just do that on AI now. And it's just, so now it looks as cheap as something you would see on Instagram. And Project Hail Mary is a perfect example of how to do it well, and that you can't just conjure that up on a watch an Instagram reel, but because someone made it randomly on a program. And that doesn't surprise me, because it was produced by Amy Pascal, and she's one of the best. So yeah, so I think, or even Sony's other movie, those Spider-Verse movies, the animated ones. I mean, they're just so original. So I just think originality is famous actors in your movies. There's a scarcity in that, and as soon as you have scarcity, you have more of a demand for it, because there's less of it. So I think people should keep that in mind when they get too doomsayery, because at the end of the day, people are going to want to watch stuff. And if their phones are just littered with, Instagram reels of explosions and funny, goofy videos, it just becomes boring, and it's too accessible. There's no...
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just free. It's just an infinite number of videos, so there's not a demand for it. There's too much of a supply for it,
And how is the AI trend of that becoming increasing? How is that affecting your production company and your business?
It doesn't really impact us at all, because if I was doing much bigger budget movies with heavy visual effects, I'm sure it would. I'm sure it would cut down probably costs, to be frank. I mean, LLM models, CGI AI is kind of a blanket term, but there's always been new technologies in CGI that makes it more efficient. Hence why there's so many movies that are out there on TV now too, with explosions and stuff like that. So this has been going on since, Jurassic Park was a technological advancement, right? That was in '94. So I don't make movies that have big visual massive effects. There's a few in the pipeline that do, but they're not like space stations or spaceships battling each other. They're more maybe explosions and stuff like that. So since I don't work in the studio level of making superhero movies, it's not. I don't even notice it at all, because indie films are pretty. They're not. There's not much use for AI with it. Now, I would say from an administrative standpoint, I use AI a lot, because what I do is it's more like organizing sales estimates, or helping organize certain parts of my company. I'll use kind of Claude and Gemini and stuff like that, or as a writer's assistant. Instead of spending, or technically, 40 years ago, you have to go to the library to come up with some answers for things. And then Now, 15 years ago, you'd have to Google and kind of, go through websites. Now it's like if I'm writing a script that takes place in 1950 Japan, and I'm wondering, well, what did that street look like in 1950 Japan? I don't have to go to a history book. I can basically ask AI and then double check it. So as a writer, it's a tool. But I would say, though, and I think it's important to note, since tech, it's like, people are saying AI is going to take over like Snowflake, MongoDB, Salesforce. These are all multi-billion, $100 billion market cap companies that are software companies. And there's, they're SaaS companies. And, people are even saying CrowdStrike and Palo Alto security softwares are going to be taken over. I don't think that part. I don't think any Fortune 500 company is going to replace an AI thing that some person made at their company internally with replace it and get rid of CrowdStrike. But the fact that people are talking about these massive software companies that are billions and, going to eventually go into trillions, that AI can take over that, yet it cannot write a joke. And I think there's something very interesting about that it has the capability of wiping out massive multi-billion-dollar companies, but if you ask it to write a joke, it can't do it. So I think for writers, they should feel optimistic that I don't think it's like, oh, it'll eventually get there. I just don't think. I think I think things that require high emotional IQ are more impervious to the threat of AI than programming and mathematics, science, medicine. So ironically, it was like the first thing that people were talking about when AI can write screenplays, but in a strange way, I think it's one of the most safer things. I do think that visually, there's probably going to be a lot of interesting stuff to happen in the next 10 years, and it's going to have a lot to do with copyright, lots to do with likeness, and it's going to get pretty crazy. But I generally think that writing is one of the more safer positions, just because, like I said, it can wipe out trillions of dollars of stock value in 2 months because people are saying AI can take over software companies, yet it can't write me a Henny Youngman joke. I mean, it just can't even it just can't do it. It can't do it. And it's shocking in some way because I thought it would probably get better to that point. So it's not useful to write, but it's useful to assist you in information you might need for a scene. And then, like I said, it's very useful for admin work, for organizing your company, accounting, and stuff like that. Like I said, non-emotional IQ things you need to do.
Yeah. What are, what's been working pretty good for you as far as with the AI, and what are some of the things that has been not so good that you've attempted?
Basically, what has been good is, like I said, administrative work. So say if I need to just quickly come up with maybe a list of actors that I'm trying to think about something for a movie. So, well, what is their value here? They're not as good as talking to a sales agent, obviously, which is somebody who understands the international market for us. But you can get a pretty good. It can just help you kind of come up with ideas. Because sometimes you sit there and someone says, "What are your favorite? Name 50 movies." It's just like that's just a strange request. It's like sometimes it's like, okay, well, I need to come up with 50 actors that might be good for this role. The software will read the script. Some of the ideas are terrible and some of them are bad, but it just makes things faster. You just work more quickly. It doesn't really make you work. Yeah, it makes you work better, but it's just more. It just feeds you more ideas. And I'm somebody who just constantly likes getting information thrown in my brain, so I can then process it and then make decisions at a kind of a rapid speed. So that's how it kind of helps. It helps with accounting. It'll help. You throw your accounting sheet in there and say, hey, what can I probably cut cost in? What am I spending too much on? It's all numbers stuff, and they'll maybe come up with ideas, but it's all administrative work. There's nothing I've used creatively with AI. The one thing I did do actually creatively, but was really helpful, probably the most helpful thing AI's done, is I needed to come up with a soundtrack for a movie I'm directing, and for an hour a day, I would go on AI and say, give me 100 examples of songs like this that are similar to this but aren't famous because I can't afford a Rolling Stone song. So I would go through 100 songs or 150 songs, and they would all from obscure artists in the 60s that I can get probably on the cheaper side, obviously, than someone like Rolling Stones. And 1 out of 100 would be good, and I would never be able to find that if I didn't have that. That's the best. So far, that's the best use case I've ever had with AI.
Yeah.
Like I said, it didn't create anything. It's not generative. It's just going through databases. And now I find that highly effective. And the things that don't work, honestly, like I said, it doesn't have emotional IQ. And without emotional IQ in the movie industry, it's like, I don't know, I don't really know what you do with it. Visually, I know that it's going in places that we don't even probably imagine. I can't even speak to that really. I don't know where it's going to be in 10 years. But for right now, I mean, you know, there's nothing to really do with that. I mean, if you want to make experimental AI movies and stuff like that and not profit off them because you're, you know, using maybe a famous actor and you can't or whatever, I mean, that's, you know, that's cool because in some way you can do that. But ultimately, you're not going to penetrate any real market. I ultimately think humans are going to want to watch other humans. Otherwise, they'd be listening to AI music. I mean, AI music's the thing, and people don't. Like artists, and they like the story of the person that they're listening to. I think it's the same way with people's reaction with movies. They like actors, they like directors. So I don't really see it. And maybe I'm being optimistic about film, or because I'm not really that, you know, hard line either way. I mean, obviously, I care more about humans making art. But I just don't see it as a big threat. And maybe I'm being stupid or naive, but I just, at least for the next 20, 30 years, but I mean, you're talking, we don't know where we're going to be in, you know, 20 years. I mean, that's, even as a country, like, you know, so to be worried about that now is just kind of, I think, frivolous and a waste of time.
Yeah, playing with the generative AI text-to-video stuff, I found that it is pretty good for, like, making, like, B-roll style clips.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that's great for maybe like a TV doc or maybe a TV show where it's not. I mean, I mostly do narrative features, so not to sound like, I don't know, pretentious, but it's like it's I feel like it'd be really good for like commercial B-roll. But like if you're making a movie, everything needs to feel completely consistent. I mean, you can have if you just randomly have so. But to your point, though, I do think advertising, that whole industry is going to be upsided because ultimately, you know, when you're watching a commercial for, you know, whatever, some fucking big pharma commercial, you're not like, man, that's great. You know, like that'll probably, I think a lot of that stuff's going to be replaced because they don't care. They don't care about what it's just a commercial. So we're already seeing it. I think Kelshi and Polymarket have AI commercials and they look stupid, but like it doesn't matter. Like, because ultimately advertising, those are companies that are just trying to cut bottom line. However, though, if companies who have Super Bowl ads, they're not going to make an AI. They're going to hire Matt Damon to be in it or famous people. So even that is, I think the high-end commercials are going to always kind of be like, you know, you have some pretty famous cinematographers and talented people making those. Now, for some of the ones that are like more maybe localized or regional commercials, I wouldn't be surprised if companies are trying to cut costs and do that with AI. But for movies, I mean, yeah, you just can't make B-roll with generative AI because it won't fit with the rest of your movie, and it'll just throw you off. Now, is that going to change? Sure. I mean, Ben Affleck just sold his company for $600 million. That was an AI company that helps you kind of fix where the lighting is. I mean, I also think that if you get too many options in the editing room, you can just go crazy, and there's something to be said about having restrictions on yourself and just being like, well, this is what we shot, and we're going to make it the best we can. But kind of being able to rearrange everything is great, but at the same time, sometimes if you're given too many options, you might overthink things, and it's just, I don't know. I don't know what that's like. I haven't used that program, obviously. It's not out. I think it's pretty much exclusively to Netflix right now, since the deal or whatever, I don't know. But I was going to say something else, but yeah, I think, yeah, I just don't think, I think visually there's room for all sorts of things, but I just think on the, like, it can't do what humans can do on an emotional scale until it becomes sentient, which it's not, which many people probably think it is, to be honest. I mean, the average person might think like, oh, this isn't just a learning language model. This is like a being, you know, and it's like, it's not. It doesn't have any emotional thing. It doesn't have like suppressed guilt or like, or it language-wise knows these things, and on some intellectual, mathematical scale knows these things, but it doesn't know it on an emotional level. It can't until it becomes sentient, and I don't think that's gonna happen. You know?
Yeah, I've definitely noticed that. You know, my dad watches TV, like traditional cable television, and I see AI commercials all the time. And these are for like,
that makes sense. I don't watch cable. I don't really watch too much TV at all. I do when I watch sports, but usually they're like, I feel like sports commercials are kind of like a big hot market ticket to have your commercial in the middle of a game. So they do the more like maybe upper echelon ones.
Yeah, it's higher end
like,
for that.
Like midterms, but I can see like late night cable. I don't have it, but I can see like just kind of, you know, I can see that. Like I haven't personally seen them, but that would just, just thinking how a company works is literally just cutting costs is their number one thing, increasing profit margins. So I would imagine that they would just get one of the first things they get rid of is that and do a generative AI commercials.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you definitely see it these days, and especially with the local and like the lower budget style commercials.
Right. Of course, yeah, because they're like, I don't, they don't. It just that always seemed like as soon as I started seeing this stuff, I was like, well, that will be different, but because there's not really a personal connection to these things. But I think the smart companies that have a lot of money will be much more skeptical to do that. You know, like companies that really need mass consumers on a mass scale, on a global scale, I don't think will probably use. You know, if you're trying to sell a car or McDonald's, like I just can see them being more. It might be another generation until that happens, but I don't see in the even in the near or even medium future of them going full blown AI. I don't know, maybe I could be wrong.
It can be, you know, it really just depends on what the consumer likes. If the consumer likes the AI stuff, like it'll go that way, and there will be some that experiment
to some degree. I mean, you do have unions in Hollywood. So the interesting about Hollywood is that and it's probably why the first things that's why it became one of the first things that people talked about when ChatGPT came out, is because there's not many white collar jobs that are unionized. And Hollywood's one of them. Like writers are unionized. Lawyers, insurers, traders, none of them they're not unionized, obviously. So they have no say. They have no ability to say you can't do that. Where Hollywood is a unionized industry, which is unusual for this country. The unions do have a say. They're like you can't do anything until we negotiate a term, and that could be restrictions on AI. And these companies can play chicken and say, oh, we'll just go make AI. But they know that they've already definitely know now that, I remember 3 years ago, the Russo brothers or whatever, I don't even know, they're the big directors. I don't really watch the movies, but they were saying that in 6 months, you're going to be able, I don't want to misquote them, but they basically said in the near future, in the next year or year and a half, whatever it is, I think it was sooner, but I'll cut them some slack. Is that you can just press a button on your remote and you can just be like, I want to be in a commercial, I want to be in a rom-com with Marilyn Monroe, and it'll be a perfectly well-made rom-com. I mean, this is delusional thinking. Technology doesn't work that fast, and clearly they were wrong. That was a year and a half. That was 3 years ago, or maybe even more. I don't know. Whenever ChatGPT came out, and they were all. I believe, and I'm not. Whatever. I won't even like. But yeah, there's a lot of people who are heavily invested in AI. I think too, who are. Trying to say, well, this is going to happen, because they're the things they're invested in go up. So I think, to kind of what you said though, is like I do think the consumers will have a say, but technically the unions have a say too. So not just the consumers. And I think consumers are probably, at least for now, I don't know. I can't speak for Gen Alpha or Gen Beta. I don't even know what the next one. I can't speak for what they would like, but for right now, Gen Z is not so excited about AI content. I mean, it's just not. It's the opposite, honestly.
Yeah, it can be used.
You're kind of seeing a new rise in movie stars. I mean, there was a little bit of a weird time where there wasn't new movie stars, but now you're seeing them in Timothée Chalamet. You're seeing them in Gosling always was kind of famous, but this new movie obviously is a big hit. Jen Ortega. I mean, there's just like a new crop of stars. So I don't know. I just think this is another thing for movies that they have to deal with, like anything else. And I don't know. I'm just not as worried as other people. And I'm surprised that people. You just have to look to history. I mean, TV was existential. I mean, like, why would anybody go see a movie? I mean, and for me personally, I obviously will love to see movies in theaters, but to see them, on Netflix is okay sometimes with me. Like, there's some movies that are like, all right, some movies that just aren't going to be in theaters. I mean, to me, that's not the end of the world, as long as that people can still make movies. And when it comes to AI, I think in the near future, it's fine. 10, 20 years from now, I can't tell you, who the hell knows?
Yeah. Yeah, just the way it's evolved in the past couple years has been like astounding.
Yeah, but like I said, man, I do genuinely think there's a cap on emotional intelligence, because it still can't generate real dialogue or jokes. It can't make a joke. Mm-hmm. That's the weirdest thing, which is on a philosophical level kind of cool. It's like there's some things that, I mean, it can probably go through 60,000 slides of cancer research and do that a pathologist, it could do things that are unfathomable scientifically that involve numbers that is incredible. But some things aren't numbers and math. Some things are emotional and more deeply ingrained in the psychological brain of a human being, not something that AI understands. So I don't know. I don't, I think there are limitations.
Yeah, it just how it drives the story forward too, in the way that it writes things. It's also based in binary, and it doesn't think like a person. So a lot of times it doesn't really have, I don't know. It's the secret sauce, I guess. The oomph and motivation that causes someone to do something that is like unique to the human experience.
Especially with I can TV shows that are maybe soaps or something like that. Like I can see a future where they can kind of know, understand this. They can hit you can input 30 episodes of something and then you can start to maybe understand it. But I'll bring up Hail Mary again. It's like there's something just oblique and nebulous about human writing or human acting that's just you can try to maybe in 3 years prompt it to say, oh, be more abstract or be. It's like I don't know. It just doesn't. It's just not the same. I mean, I don't fully. The uncanny valley stuff I think is part of it too, but I don't know. I think that sometimes too is like, well, like I don't know. There's some stuff I've seen that are like music videos that I guess were AI, and I was like, I didn't see a total disconnect, but I don't think it's that. I just don't think it's as talented as a human being when it comes to emotional situations. I think visually it can I think it can seep through someone and it's not necessarily uncanny valley, because we've also seen characters that are CGI that have moved us before, and that's not a human. So I'm not sure, I don't fully buy into that, but I just don't think it's as good, and I'm shocked actually how it hasn't progressed on the writing side almost at all. I mean, very little relative to how much has progressed with mathematics and science, which makes way more sense. You know what I mean? I mean, that's basically Chinese use it very efficiently for healthcare and all these different things that are, where it almost feels like we're almost too preoccupied with just making like videos of like, Trump and Obama hanging out. And it's just like, what is the point of like, where, not to like, glaze China, but I'm just saying, like, I feel like they're using it more efficiently for like society, where I'm not to say there are obviously companies doing it for like capitalistic reasons to cut down on margins and stuff like that, like Walmart, McDonald's. Like there's tons of AI implementation for efficiency, which is like another word for getting rid of labor, which is not good either. That's a whole other discussion that like is like a econ thing, but like no, I don't know, it's definitely interesting, and it definitely, at the very least, the one good thing that might come out of it, and with still using human actors and human writing, is it will cut costs down a little bit if you're in the editing room. I mean, I edited all my movies by myself and did all my sound design and my and all that stuff on my own anyway. So for somebody who maybe doesn't know that stuff, it might get easier. I'm sure Adobe is going to be trying to implement AI like crazy, because their stock is down to $238 a share and their PE ratio is 13. I mean, they basically just got wiped out, which I think is totally overblown. I think filmmakers are always going to they're not going to use AI to create their own editing software. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. But the stock market and the evaluations of these software companies that are supposedly going to be taken over by AI have just been all like cut in half or by 60-70%, which is, like I said, trillions of dollars in market cap. But Adobe, that you use for film editing, has gotten completely tanked. So they'll probably start putting in AI plugins to keep up, keeping shareholders happy. So you'll have some kid in Ohio or whatever sitting there as a 16-year-old and maybe has the ability to make more stuff. So I'm okay with that, because you don't want just the old guard, and let's face it, mostly very wealthy people in Los Angeles or who can afford to move here, et cetera, et cetera. You'll have places maybe in impoverished areas that are, let's be real, far just as talented as the people who are making movies here, but they just don't have the resources to do it. You can't just make a movie. You need millions of dollars. So like when people are like, oh, this is the most talented director ever, it's like, no, there's probably, there's a lot of billions of people in the world. There's probably maybe 50 million people who are just as good or talented or whatever you want to use for it, but they just have no way capability of putting what they have in their head onto a screen. There's no way they can do it. They might live in Uganda or the Philippines or West Virginia. They have no capability of having what they have in their head come on screen because they don't have the millions of dollars to do it. So I think that is important too to keep in mind.
I definitely see that. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. I was just gonna say that's just it's an overused word, but like it is. It's something Coppola talked a lot about. How eventually film will reach to a point where it's not professional anymore and it's truly a real art form where it becomes not amateur, but which is ironic because that actually word comes from the word love and passion, so it's kind of a bad word, but it shouldn't be. Something Orson Welles talked a lot about. But no, Coppola talks about that. One day it'll just be a real art form that anybody can do, and he said that in the 80s. I mean, he wasn't talking recently. He said that, I think in 81. And so, he's kind of he thinks a lot about the future and stuff like that. And so I don't know if he meant AI. I don't know exactly what he meant. I think cell phones is something that has helped me. I mean, my first movie that I did as a narrative filmmaker, I shot on a cell phone. Because I didn't have any money. And I wouldn't be able to do that I didn't have the money to get an RE at that time. I was in my late 20s. I was like, I can't do that. And Coppola actually told me to go shoot a movie on a cell phone. So so that's humans are still involved in doing that. So I think it's different than AI. But I mean, let's be real. I was able to do it with far less people, So it's all very interesting. But ultimately, I think things move slower than people realize. Because of capitalism, because of government. Look what's happening recently with the war. All this AI stocks are getting hit hard. There's credit issues with OpenAI and like Oracle, and there's all sorts of weird stuff going on in the alternative financial instruments at like Apollo and Blackstone. So these things slow these things down. Also, government has a say in things too. There'll be laws made against certain things. There was something passed in California, I think, about not just having AI as paralegal advice to clients. Humans have a say in this role. We're not in some sort of dystopic thing like Sam Altman talks about, where he's just like, I've created everything that will unleash AI on everybody. It's just not how things work. It's gonna be faster than some technological changes over the past 500 years. But I don't think it's just gonna be. Well, I mean, it's already been proven that it wasn't just this overnight thing where everybody loses their job. And we're all just kind of like in the movie WALL-E or something,
Yeah, I just thinking about when I was starting with my education in Adobe Premiere, and I had to teach myself and watch YouTube videos and trying to ask questions and not being able to find the answer because of the algorithm. Now with ChatGPT, it's so much and other LLMs, so much easier to get answers to like where is the select section button in Premiere, and you try and find a YouTube video, you'll be looking for 45 minutes to find the actual video that tells you where the button is, whereas now you can that's actually the best example. I think you to answer your question that I maybe didn't answer well. I was that's honestly just the best use of it. It's just I need to know this. Okay, thank you. That's it. I mean, but that's not nothing. Maybe if you accumulate that over a whole week, that's 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours. Especially if you're doing a lot of research on something, and you proof it and make sure it's, not fucking hallucinating, but no, that is its best use case. It's like a little assistant tool, that you don't need to pay. Well, you pay them $20 a month or whatever, or $200 if you get the better versions. But yeah, so it's just. Like I said, I think these things, these advancements move slower than people think, and that's already been proven to be true. I'd be really curious to see what happens with the union. We're up on new negotiations for SAG and WGA. So I mean, obviously, I just side with the union pretty much 100%. I mean, I'm going to side with them, but I hope that there's I don't think the industry can handle another strike. So hopefully the AI or the studios don't use that too hard as leverage, but because also the studios need to make content because their share prices are fucking falling like crazy too. So hopefully there's a little bit of a mutual deterrence there that we can just get a good deal in. Yeah. Just to switch directions a little bit, just from the AI and the filmmaking stuff back over to your business and how it affects you. What's one of the major issues? If you could solve one of the problems that you run into on a consistent basis, whether it's with an AI tool or not, what's the biggest issue that you have running a production company?
I'm finding money. You know, I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, it's just pretty much like if I had a better way to connect my projects to financial resources, whether it be sales agents, or I would say specific territories, and maybe even skipping over sales agents, or private equity, who are somehow, I would have the ability to know that they want to park some money into movies as an alternative asset class, because they also know, hey, you know, I might only get my money back and mainly make maybe I'll even lose a little bit of money, but you know what? I'll get to say I executive produced this movie with whatever famous actress, and it's a cool movie, or maybe it's an issue they care about, and they get to, you know, it's a life-changing experience for them. That's mostly what a lot of private equity investors are here for. They're not dumb. They've made a lot of money knowing that there's a heavy amount of risk involved. Now you can make things less risky by putting them in different waterfall positions of their investment, but ultimately that would be really good. I don't know what the answer to that is, and if there was an AI tool to help me do that, I would use it all day. I wouldn't be morally objected to using AI to do that. You know, movies need money, and connecting the dots between a great project and maybe somebody who might be interested in it is very difficult. And I'm sure there's a way that could happen, likely involving AI in some capacity. And that is the biggest thing. I think that and time. There's sometimes just not enough time in the day to do things. But AI makes that actually a little bit easier because of the mundane stuff, like we talked about asking questions. But if it can help me find money for my movies, then, you know, I'll sign up whatever I need to, because that's the hardest part. It's the most expensive paintbrush. Orson Welles said he spent, I think I'm not exact number. He said, I think I've spent 5% of my life making movies and 95% of my life trying to find money for movies. No way to live, he said. I mean, it's like, you know, it's pretty. That's why I write and produce at my own company, because it's so hard to get movies that I want to direct to get financing. It's just, and for anybody. I mean, it's like, even, you know, there's exceptions like Spielberg, Scorsese, Paul Thomas Anderson, but even they have to fight to get them. I mean, so it's a thing as old as time. But if there was some way to connect people who have mutual interests or mutually aligned interests, if I need money to make this movie and I have money and I want to be involved in a movie, something like this, then that would be my biggest. That would be the biggest desire I have as a company owner and as a filmmaker.
And how do you currently do this?
I mean, there's just so many random, different, bizarre ways that it occurs. It's a lot of just like chance, luck, meeting the right person at the right time. There's no really like. I mean, there was times where I would scour through and email people, and I've noticed that it's mostly been through kind of a bizarre chance, like luck, randomness. There's a lot of work. You have to kind of, you know, it's like in sports. Like the harder you work, the luckier you get. I mean, I do believe that, obviously. I mean, I don't know how that wouldn't be true. But like, so yeah, it's a lot of just randomness and luck. But and just kind of always keeping your eye out for money, and there's people who've helped find money and stuff like that. And that's another way to do it as well. There are finders in the industry. I used to be one of them, like I told you earlier. You know, I would find money for movies that were much bigger than what I could have done at the age of 24 or 5 or 6 or 7, and I would connect them to somebody who already has made the movie. You know, it's already done. They just need some money for post or something, or something for music licensing. So there's all sorts of different ways, but there's no one way or 2 ways or 3 ways. There's bizarre because it's such a strange industry that, you know, it's not as linear like real estate or anything. You know?
One thing you mentioned was not enough time in the day. What is one of the things that is your biggest time sink?
I mean, I don't even know. I mean, sometimes it's just like, because I write my own scripts too, and I'm not just the business person, I think I just like, it's not so much enough time in the day, there's not enough time in the year, if that makes any sense, because you have to wait on so many people. You have to wait on them to read the script and their agents, and it takes, you know, a month. So it's not so much in a day. I mean, there's sometimes I have to wait. I have too much free time in a day sometimes, because I'm waiting on or an investor or a producer. So I'm waiting for someone to read a script. You could call it Hollywood time, where it's really slow. And then it's like, oh, it's a big film festival. Everybody stops working for 3 weeks. Or not everybody, but a lot of people go out of town. Or if it's late August, it's like a vacation month. So it's more like I need more time in a year, not in a day. Because if anything, like I said, sometimes I'll kind of sit twiddling my thumbs and being like, wow, I got to find something else to do right now, because I'm waiting on 4, 6, 7 different people. So I would say that's kind of more what I meant. which is, everybody in the industry understands that and knows what that's like, especially on the creative side, because executives have a lot to deal with that. I think a lot of writers and directors who might sometimes say, oh, they're so slow. Like they're dealing with a lot of other stuff. I have a lot of friends who are executives, so I don't blame anybody. It's just kind of how the industry is. I think there probably is a faster way to do things, but I don't know the answer to that question of how that can be constructed. But no, so I think I meant more months in a year, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Like.
Well, I think we're getting pretty close up on time. I just had one more question for you, and then I was going to leave it open for you. Was there anything that you would want to share with the new generation of people that are interested in doing what you do, which is like the production side, or someone else that's like, hey, I want to move to LA and be an actor or a director or a writer or whatever their passion is, and how, like, some advice you could give them on transitioning from just that starving artist mentality to having, like, a successful production company that can support, your creative passions as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, I would say at first, just make stuff. Don't wait to make stuff at all. I feel, even though I made stuff in my 20s, I still felt like I could have probably done more. I mean, maybe I would have positioned myself a little better as a director. But, I don't really, not really a regret person. But, like, just make stuff is the most important thing. Don't be like, oh, I need to wait until this or I need to wait until that, because it doesn't work that way. You just have to make shit, and you can't be, like, embarrassed about it. You just have to make it, and then have a job that pays your rent but gives you enough time to maybe write, work on the weekends on the movie with your friends. Now, if you want to go the entrepreneurial route, I mean, that's a different ball game. I mean, that's like so hyper specific to someone's situation, because I started my company while I was working at a company, and I got fired because I was running the company out of their company. So then I really had to be like, oh fuck, and I was broke for 6 years or whatever before I started really generating money. So that wasn't fun at all, and it was pretty dark at times. So I would need more time to talk about if somebody start a production company. That's just I think you should anyway. Even if it's not something you work on 24 hours a day that monetizes, I think it's useful to have, just if you want to start taking your career more seriously, where you can have your small projects be under the liability under the LLC. That way, if something happens, you can it's part of your company or whatever. So I think there's value in just having an LLC, but starting your company to generate money is a very different thing, especially if you don't have startup money, have very little startup money. Yeah, but ultimately, it's just make stuff. That's the only thing you can do. And there's ways to do it. Like, I used to kind of be like, no, I get it, it's hard for some people. It's like, no, like we're talking about, like, the technology is getting cheaper to make stuff. You just have to make stuff. There's no other way to, there's no excuse to not make stuff. Like kind of like what I did, is go make documentaries for a little bit, because you don't really need money to make documentaries. You can just edit, you can shoot on your phone, you can edit on your laptop, and that's it. And you work around some things and you get some music in there and you try to make something that's powerful. But you can do that for no money on a weekend and make a short.
Yeah.
You just have to.
Yeah, I've done it myself.
And the more you do it, the more comfortable you'll get in just realizing that. That's the biggest thing. I think at first it's just like a weird mental hurdle. But yeah, so that's the best way I can answer that one.
Okay. Was there anything else that you wanted to share with us? Any upcoming events or movies coming out that you want to?
I think just follow us at Assembly Line Entertainment on Instagram, and that way you can kind of see anything. Right now we're packaging movies, so we don't actually have a big release coming up. We do have a movie called Desert Angel that's coming out, directed by Vinny DeLuca. He's a very talented director. And we've been kind of helping them with the release, so that's going to be announced probably in the summer, release end of summer. So it's about this guy Raphael, who for 20 years would be finding lost immigrants who were trying to cross the border. So it's a very great documentary. The director spent 10 years making it. But yeah, just follow us on Assembly Line Entertainment.
Okay. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Janek. This is Janek Ambros from Assembly Line Entertainment. And check out his movies. And thank you so much for sharing your insights for the other professionals and the new generation coming in.
Of course, man. Anytime.
All right. Aloha.
Later.